I thought it would be super cool one day to maybe, own my own RIA and, help like queer professionals or help people who just really, really want to give back to their communities, and like heavy on philanthropy. And it's really cool because I've already chatted with some CFPs who have this specific niche.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. I just wanted to give a shout out for anyone who is interested in being a guest. It is completely anonymous, so we'll let you choose a fake name and we will hide identifiable information so you can come on the show and share freely. It is a full hour to an hour and a half with me, Barbara, and we'll do a deep dive on your finances, where you're doing well, where maybe you're struggling, and come up with a game plan for how to reach your financial goals. To be a guest, you just need to put a submission in either on Instagram or on our website, www.futurerichpodcast.com. And you just need to be a female. As we've said before, this podcast is produced with Amy, Alex, and myself, so an all-female team, and our goal is to help improve financial education amongst women, so that is why we interview women about their finances. So if you're listening to this and you're interested in being a guest, please put in a submission on our website, www.futurerichpodcast.com, or send us a message on Instagram.
Hello, and welcome to Financials Podcast Future Rich. I'm your host, Barbara Ginty, and I'm also a CFP. And I am here today with a former guest who is coming on to chat about maybe moving into the industry. So this is something that I have been asked about a lot before. So instead of doing a private chat, I asked if you would come on so we could discuss the industry as a whole and why I personally think it's a great career path. So welcome, Celine.
Great. Thanks for having me, Barbara.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So fill me in on what's going on. It's been a little bit since you've come on the pod, and tell me how you became interested in, maybe this is very different than what you are currently doing if you go the personal
Yes.
finance route.
Yes, so I'm currently an aircraft mechanic, which is a crazy pivot, I think. Anytime you go blue collar to white collar or vice versa, I think it's probably a huge, huge thing to get used to because, you're used to an environment. I know in my environment, I'm wearing t-shirts, I'm wearing pants and cargo pants and, those sorts of things coming into an environment where I may have to dress up a little bit more. Even the day to day, right? The small parts of it are pretty interesting to think about. But yeah, the whole reason I listen to the show, I have a huge interest in personal finance. I'm originally from the Boglehead Ramit Sethi side of things, and so it was really really interesting to find my way into this field because obviously I know like Ramit now, he'll suggest like flat fee advisors and all of that, but he's pretty staunchly against financial advisors and especially those who take AUM fees. But the more I looked into it, and at this point, I've chatted probably with about 10 to 15 different CFPs. Everyone has just been so inviting and so eager to, teach me about the field. And I find that as a green flag, quite frankly, because, a lot of, I'm sure tech, I'm sure business, there's a lot of hoarding going on in terms of ideas and mindsets and success rates and all of these things. It's like, no, I don't want my competitors to know, but I haven't come across any of that, and I think I found the right people to chat with, so that also has probably helped.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say overall, yeah, there's always in every industry going to be somebody who's not willing to share or not willing to help. I mean, I think that's just those are probably just not nice people in general.
Yeah.
But I would say that, yeah, I have always found the field very welcoming, and shockingly, people are always offering to help. Like I could meet an advisor one time and then say, "Oh, could I call you about something?" And absolutely take your call. We'll explain
Yeah.
how they did it, why they think it worked, and honestly, even and I'm in a small town in upstate New York, and even here, I'm friends with the other advisors. Are friendly. Like one of my technically would be my biggest competitor. We meet at the local brewery like once a year. And
Yeah.
I think that if you run a good business, as you were saying, like Ramit Sethi is very much against AUM. And I feel like I have a very strong argument for when AUM makes the most sense. And his audience, it probably doesn't make the most sense. So who he's
Right.
speaking to what he
Yeah.
believes aligns with them. And I think that just like no one's personal finances are the same, not one way to get financial advice is going to be appropriate for everybody. You have to choose what you would like. And so
Yeah,
I
and
think,
honestly, that's what I find super interesting about niches is if you can that like I have been delving into imagining, different niches that I'd be interested in. And some people get really specific. I chatted one of the first CFPs that I chatted with. He was telling me about his buddy who was a ex-nuclear engineer, and his niche was nuclear engineers who were 5 years away from retiring. And I was like, wow, that is a niche. And so that sort of inspired me to really think about the types of people that I want to attract and honestly that I want to work with. And I thought it would be super cool one day to maybe, own my own RIA and, help like queer professionals or help people who just really, really want to give back to their communities, and like heavy on philanthropy. And it's really cool because I've already chatted with some CFPs who have this specific niche. And I'm like, wow, it already exists. That's actually incredible. Like these are people that are doing it and prove that it can be done, which is just awesome.
yeah, and that's why it's not, I think that's why it's not so competitive, right? Because, I know who I want to work with. And also, I will say that depending on how you run the business, there is a scale issue, right? So, like, I know I can only
Absolutely.
personally work with so many clients. And so I do think that for majority of advisors, you know who you want to work with, you know what your business is. And even though we might look similar, who we want to work with as clients might be slightly different. So it helps with the competition part, right? Because there's a lot of variations in this industry. So why
Hmm.
don't I just kind of state that? So Roommate Safety doesn't like AUM. I am an AUM advisor and
Yeah,
I love it. I hate billing clients because some people are AUM
I
and
know.
fee. Some are there's all these hybrids. So basically when people say fee only is just referencing that you're not doing commission. And so within
Yes.
fee only, there can be a flat fee, which is like you pay you know, $6,000, a retainer where you keep someone on retainer and then you kind of pay the more you use the service and you pay a retainer to have them on call. And then it can be an hourly rate as well. That's one way to do it. The way I do it, which is often common, is percentage of AUM and then everything is included. And then other people do percentage of AUM. And then as you want more services, you get flat feed for certain services and AUM covers part of it, but not all of it. So there is like so people say fee only. There's a lot of variations. And then
Yeah.
you can also do commission within that. And so usually, I think it's great that you've interviewed a lot of CFPs. I'd be curious kind of what the breakdown is of how they're doing it. But you usually just choose and build a business that works for you because you want to work with people that you like and that you feel like you can help in a capacity in which you feel comfortable charging for those services.
Absolutely. And I think that's what it comes down to because I have chatted with fee-based and fee-only CFPs at this point, and everything I've heard on both sides to me sounds valid and quite frankly ethical. And so because that's the biggest thing for me that draws me to the fee only side is the whole ethics side of it, conflict of interest, all of that. But
Hmm.
a fee based CFP that I chatted with actually made a good point. He was like, well, if you know that most people, especially in America, need insurance because we aren't provided, like basic needs
Yep.
like healthcare, um, why wouldn't you get a commission from something that you're gonna go suggest that they get somewhere else that you could have just provided in house? And I'm like, okay, good point. Yeah, like you got me on that one.
Well, what I'll say is often if you say, okay, you need life insurance and term is the cheapest insurance, which you get paid not a big, a very small commission on, like a
Small
negligible,
commission, right?
very small. And you send them to go get insurance because you just charge them for that piece of advice. And then you say, okay, now you go get it. And then they get sold whole life because that the person that sold it to them wanted the big commission. And they said, well, I went
Exactly.
there and I know you said term, but when I talked to the person at the insurance house, they said I had to have this. And so then you're like, okay, well, I should have just taken the small commission and done it for them because then I know it was
Yeah,
done right.
that's another aspect. That's like if you send them anywhere else, it's likely going to be a broker dealer who's going to try to upsell them, who is going to try to get them on something like whole life. And at that point, now they're locked in likely and they're losing money. And yeah, so like that adds a whole nother dimension.
So the way I like to think about it is you're either an ethical person or you're not an ethical
You're not.
person,
Absolutely.
right? So you're either one or you're either ethical or you're not ethical. And when you get the CFP, you automatically have that fiduciary standard of care, which is doesn't matter what you're touching, anything related to the client, you're acting as a fiduciary, putting their interest first. And so some people want to say like, oh, I'm going to go online. Then here's where it's like, if, depending on the age of the person you're dealing with, they might be capable of going online and shopping for the thing you told them to go shop for. But you might get someone who's either really busy or older and not comfortable with that. And they say, well,
Yeah.
I don't, because often what I see, and this is why I do AUM is, well, can you just do it for me? Like, I don't,
Yeah.
I don't want it to do list
Not
when I come.
everyone.
Yeah,
Right.
not
Not
everyone wants
everyone is
the
a
to-do list.
DIYer. Yeah.
And so I think there's a place for all. That's why, like, it's more popular, and Ramit's definitely podcast is doing way better because he's like, oh, you should never do this. And I think it's very hard when you're a professional working in this space to
Mhm.
have like those hard lines where you say never. You could say most times, often, right? Because it depends on the
Yeah.
situation. And so I think that for certain people, the flat fee is great. They just want to pay. They want to get the advice. They want to make sure they're doing it right, but they do want to do it. They're happy to have the to-do list of, okay, rebalance your 401k. This is what you should do with your stock options. I'm going to go get this insurance you told me about. And they paid for that advice, and that's great. But then you have plenty of other people. And I would say personally, if I hired a professional, like you can hire a personal trainer to give you a list of workouts. I don't want a list of workouts. I need you to stand in front of me and tell me
Yeah.
what to do. And then I'm going to
Yeah.
argue that I shouldn't do the plank for a minute. I should only really do 45. But
Right.
I know who I am. And so I tend to work with clients who don't want to go out and do it on their own, where they want to come and they want one-stop shopping and they want me to handle everything. I need to go to
Yep.
see a CPA, give me the CPA recommendations. If I need to see an attorney, can you come with me for the attorney meeting? I don't want to go by myself. I don't want to put the inventory list together. And so and that's how I would be when I hire a professional. I don't want to be involved. Like, I don't, like, we have a tech person. I don't want to look at it. I don't care. You tell me what I need, and then just I want to write you a check, and I want to be done. And so I tend to work
Yeah.
with people who want a professional like that, where you're going to pay me an AUM fee, everything will be included, and I basically handle as much of it as I can. Sometimes they call, they're like, can you go to can you do my social security filing? And I'm like, no, no, I can't do that for you. Like, this is the federal government, like, you have to do that. You're like, gonna file your social security claim for you. But and so
Yeah.
like that's the nice thing is you just choose, like, you can really customize how you build the business, and there's all different people out there, right? And so there's people that fit so nicely with flat fee, with retainer, with AUM, and
Right.
you can choose how you build it.
Yeah. And I think what you're really getting at is that every person has different needs. And so that to me is why niches make even more sense, because you can count on a few basic things being the same in terms of goals, in terms of what people are comfortable with, if you pick a niche. And because,
Yes.
obviously most people want to retire. Most
Yeah.
people want to, like, as far as that goal seems to be getting away from us, it is a want and a need for most people. And you can appeal to that, right? But if you are pulling from this group that they have 10, hundreds, thousands of different desires, needs, you know, the money they want to use in their life, the money they want to leave in their life. Like, it gets so complex from what I know of the field already, that you do have to narrow it down a little bit.
Get to narrow down a lot because there's like
Yeah.
local government retirees are very different than federal government retirees versus
Mhm.
people that don't have pensions, and single retirees are very different than married retirees, than
Yeah.
widowed retire. I mean, you can within retiree there's a lot, and then you have the whole other realm of, well, I want to do coast fire or fire, which is a totally different planning if you're going to be doing
Oh
it.
yeah.
So within retiring, which would be the commonality, I mean, you can even get more specific within the retiree realm, or retiring with a special needs child versus not retire,
Yep.
like that's a different type of planning. So there's a
Yeah.
lot, and you'll see that, yeah, as you've met with advisors is you'll see everything. People that specialize in federal governments, people that specialize in local governments, people that specialize in teachers, people that specialize in, dentists or doctors. Those are very specific. And people that
Yeah.
specialize in C-suite because they have different packages. They tend to move around more. People that have special needs children. That's a whole specialty. As you
Yeah.
said,
I saw
planning for.
I saw a niche today that was like childless people, because
Yep.
their long-term
Yes.
care, their
Yes.
estate planning, like all of that is so insanely different. And a
So
lot of
different.
what the federal government has built in, because a lot of childless people also don't get married. So that introduces a whole new complexity as well, which I just find so fascinating. There are so many different, niches that exist. Like that in itself is so fascinating to me because people are so different and their needs are so different.
So different. Yeah, there's like we could go on and on. Like we do a whole podcast on like all the nuances because as you said, people are different, and then you can find some commonality amongst, like the nuclear was nuclear engineering. Yeah, so that's like
Yes, right.
very specific, but that person probably relates really well because he was in that profession, right? And
Yeah,
so we see
yeah,
that a lot that people will leave a profession and then focus on that profession as the advisor because they know it.
yes, yeah. And yeah, that's super interesting to me because I think that's right. This field is so interpersonal. It's so like you have to have the EQ, you have to have that emotional intelligence to relate to people. And so I am drawn obviously to people like me. And so if I was chatting with 65-year-old white guys who came from a completely different field, it's like I would have it would be a bit of a loss to relate to them, at least on the EQ side. I could tell them everything
Yeah,
they probably needed to know about retiring, about how they needed to like I could advise them, right? Once I have that level of knowledge, I could advise them on a technical level, but on a emotional, interpersonal level,
personal.
I would struggle. And so that's why I think it's really cool. And I also think that's what also has drawn me to the fee only side was like I have just seen some insane specialized niches that do so well on that side of things. And it's not necessarily because they're fee only. I just think the community of people, like especially in XYPN and like all those sorts of communities, they seem to know like exactly what they want out of their business, who they want to work with. And so I just think that's super cool to see on that side of things.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I will say that if you're going to do this, the reason I like to do it is because of the relationships, right? Like I
Yes,
like
same.
to build the relationships and I like to see the progress, right? So you take somebody from point A to point B, or this is unbelievable to me because I wouldn't agree, but I've had clients say, "Well, you've saved my life." And now, so Ramit
Wow.
Sethi, I always think of him when I'm like, well, what was that worth? Because like, yeah, you
Right.
paid
What is
me
it
a you
worth?
paid
That's the big
you paid
question.
you paid me a fee for that, but I caught you in a fraudulent transaction and they would have wiped you out to zero at
Right.
70. And I
Yeah.
because I had a good relationship with you and understood when you were calling with the scammer on the line that this was
Yep.
unusual and I wasn't going to go for it. But
Yeah.
you did pay me a fee all those years. So you get to build these really deep interpersonal relationships and really help people in very not hopefully celebratory moments, but also in very vulnerable moments. Someone gets sick, there's a long term
Yeah.
care need, and then you need to
Well,
celebrate the big moments with them. And so it wasn't always this. It used to be like advisors were like stock, and there are still some like where they're more stock pickers and they call, you don't
yes.
ever
Like
meet the
wealth
person.
advising and investment advisors. Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
a lot of
it's
teams
very
have that
different.
specialty.
But I like the reason I do it and the reason I like it is I like building and getting to know your clients and building those relationships. And so, like you said, if you don't relate to the 65-year-old retiree, you want to pick people that you want to work with. Like when the phone rings, you want to say, "Oh yeah, of course I want." You don't want the phone to ring and be like, "Oh, I don't want to talk to this person," right? You want
Yes,
to,
exactly.
especially if you're going to build your own practice, you want to build it where you enjoy it.
Yeah. And I mean, note on the note of being like a queer individual and part of the LGBT community, I have had chats with advisors who told me straight up, they were like, if you don't lean into that, you may not do well in this field. And I'm like, oh wow, okay, thank you? Question mark.
I think you should choose what
I
what
am in the
fits
South, I
you.
should say.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
think I don't think that, like, so for instance, I was told because I was an entrepreneur, right, and I didn't go and work for a big, wealth
Yeah.
management firm, but I was an entrepreneur,
Right.
that I should really lean into entrepreneurs. That's what I was told.
Hmm.
It's not what I wanted. Actually, like, I
Yeah.
really enjoyed, I've always been an old soul. I prefer working with people right before retirement, in
Yeah.
retirement, and post. I really enjoy estate planning. I really enjoy pensions. I love Social Security, which, for my age was odd to like really
I
just
love
love
Social
that.
Security too. I find
I
it
love
super
it.
interesting. So,
It's an amazing, amazing program. And so I didn't listen. I didn't lean into what technically I was, which was a young entrepreneur. And they said, go after
right.
young entrepreneurs because you'll relate, because I
Yeah.
didn't like the planning. I didn't like the planning just for that. That wasn't as engaging to me as the other stuff. So I disagree. I think you'll be successful as long as you put the effort in, you put the work in, and then you
Yeah.
pick an interesting. I think a niche is a great idea. I think you have to have a niche because otherwise it's too broad and it's hard to know who you're attracting. But I don't think because
Hmm.
this is who I am, you have to choose the identity, the matching identity
Yeah.
for your client base. I don't think
Yeah.
that's true. I
Yeah.
think you
And I
can
think,
if you'd like
right.
to, but you don't have
I
to.
the more I think about it, it's like I definitely, I lean just more towards wanting to work with progressive individuals because for me, it's the whole thing that kept me from potentially going into this field was the fact that, I am going to help like high net worth individuals. And unfortunately, a lot of those people sometimes don't really care much about putting that money towards things that I believe that that money should be put towards, right? And of course, you have to be careful with projecting your own beliefs onto your clients. That is
Correct.
something that I've heard, you kind of got to be wary about. And sometimes you grit your teeth and say, okay, that's what you want, we can work with you. But
Hmm.
I do feel like the more that I'm able to align and keep my morals and my virtues, in this industry, the more successful I feel like I can definitely translate it into,
Well,
if
so
that makes
that so
sense.
that's a niche. So you could say that, one of the things we strive for is charitable giving and social investing, right? And
Yeah,
that could be your
right.
niche,
Yeah,
right? Because that is a niche,
definitely.
right?
Yeah,
And you say these are the social investing, like that this is what we recommend. We always like to work with folks of a charitable mindset. We can help initiate that and help you maximize your tax benefits for charitable giving. So that
yeah,
could be your niche, looking for people of, this age that are professionals that are interested in these three things. We really help individuals maximize these three, charitable
yeah,
giving, social investing, and community engagement, whatever that might be.
absolutely.
So you can make it, yeah, whatever you want. But yeah, I think that was bad. You have to lean into it. No, you just
Yeah,
you
no, I won't obviously mention names, but this
okay.
advisor, my partner was basically knew this woman and she reached out to me and was like, hey, I heard you're interested in this industry, like you should chat with this guy. And he came in hot on that call, and he was basically like, I did my digging and I can tell you aren't like the typical person in this field. And I was like, okay. And he was like, you know there will be clients who won't work with you because of like how you present, what you like believe in, and what they're able to figure out about you online. And I'm like, well, then I don't want to work with those kinds of
Yeah, then you don't
people.
want it.
If they
Yeah,
don't
that's
do,
exactly.
it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And I get passionate about this. I'm sorry, but it's the same thing that I deal with in my current field, where it's like there are people who take one look at me and formulate their ideas about me, right? And that
Yeah,
is something that I can't help. I cannot
correct,
I cannot
correct.
change the way that they think. So all I can do is show up to work on time, do a good job, go above and
Yeah.
beyond to prove them wrong. Like and it's the same in any industry, I feel, right?
It's
Like,
yeah. You can never control other people. You can only control yourself. And
yeah,
so, and I think that, that person that was there, everyone has opinions. That he clearly had a very strong opinion. But I think
yeah,
you can be very successful, whatever your niche is. I don't think your niche needs to be a mirror image of exactly who you are. I think that
yeah,
components of who you are will fall naturally into your niche, right? You're charitable, you care about
yeah.
the community, you care about social or impact investing. And so those might
Hmm.
be part of your niches. because that's reflective of who you are as a person and how you show up in the world. But it doesn't have to
Right.
be a mirror image. It doesn't have to be they have to look just like me to be my client because that's not fun either, right? Because you want to have some
No, yeah.
diversity and meet
Yeah.
interesting people and
And like
yeah,
have
I
some
wouldn't
challenges for sure.
have some challenges. And just because someone doesn't look like you or present like you doesn't mean they're bad, so
No.
that person I think had my opinion is a very narrow perspective of things. So
Yeah.
I think that what I have found is I'm not really a runner anymore, but I like to ski and I used to like to run. I now walk because I'm getting old. Um, and so what we have found, and it's just like I didn't notice it, but when I have someone new in the office, they're like, "Oh, you have like a lot of runners and a lot of skiers," and it just happened. Not everybody, but it just happened naturally. And maybe I wouldn't know that they were runners or skiers, but then they find out
Hmm.
I ski and they say, "Oh, I used to ski a ton when I was younger. I don't do it as much, or I do, still run small races." And you find stuff like you'll find out more as you build the relationships, but you end up finding, and not everybody, but like, commonalities amongst your clients because you're going to want to work with, you're a nice person, you want to work with nice people, and you'll
Yeah.
get to know your clients, and then you'll say, "Oh, wow, we actually I have a lot in common with the people you
Yeah.
don't even into, right?" You're like, "Okay, I'm a good fit. I can serve your needs. I can provide a valuable service to you. And I like you and you're nice and I think I can help." And then you
Right.
match, right? And not everybody, just like everything in life, not everybody is a fit. And that's
Yes.
and that's okay. That's just life, right? Like different strokes for different folks. Just because, you
Yes.
don't want to work with me, because there's gonna be people that you're not gonna want to work with. And they might want to work with you, and those are always uncomfortable. You just say, "I don't think this is the best fit," and
Yeah. And you're
that's
doing
your
them a service
prerogative.
at the end of the day. You are doing them a service by telling them, "Hey, listen, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I feel comfortable." And I think it's, in the beginning, I imagine, especially if you start your own business, you have to be really careful about taking on clients because you're like desperate, right? You want clients
Yeah.
because you have none. And
Yes,
that
exactly.
is I've been telling all the CFPs that I've chatted with, like, I'm trying not to put the cart in front of the horse, but I do think that with being a career changer, it's a huge deal to think about, okay, what do I want? Like, what at this point, with what I know about the industry, what do I think I want at the end? And if you're having a hard time visualizing that, then you shouldn't just casually jump into a new industry. And so that's why I'm trying to be intentional about thinking about 5, 10, 15 years down the line, like, where do I think I want to end up? And on that note, I'm going back to school right now. I'm starting my term at SNHU's online bachelor's of finance with a concentration in financial planning. And end of October, it will validate the CFP coursework, so I'll likely just take a review
Okay.
course when I come out. That saves me thousands of dollars.
Yeah, that's great.
Obviously that's great. And I'm potentially I have the materials to get my Series 65 right now, but I'm starting school and I'm still working full time, and I may be taking on a part-time job doing client service work for remote fee only advisors. So that is
That's
something.
That's a better idea. Just because the thing is, you're smart, you'll pass the test, right? So, not to say that you won't learn anything by passing the test, but
Yeah,
you're just going to study the material to take the material. What I really think with the working in client service is you're going to see what's involved from a like
absolutely.
implementation standpoint, like how much paperwork
Yes.
we have, how much compliance we have, and kind of
Yeah.
what data involves, because they don't put any of that in. They don't really explain that very well in the tests. Like
No. Yeah,
what's
and the
involved.
65 the 65 is very much just focused on the investments from what I can tell. It's a registered investment advisor, and I I'm interested in the investments, but kind of like you, the more like relational side and just loving to help people with their money is what I'm really drawn to. And getting into the habits, the nitty gritty, the psychology behind it. And so after I get my CFP, because I know that's the gold standard, like that's the
Hmm.
fiduciary aspect of that is super important. But I'm super interested in, like getting my CFT. I don't know if you're familiar with that designation, but it's the certified financial therapy designation. And that side is so interesting to me, and that leans more into the lifestyle side of things
Yep.
too. And again, long term, like I find that stuff super interesting. So it's something worth considering, something worth looking into.
Yeah, absolutely. And the CFP, you'll learn a lot because it does investments, it goes through insurance planning, which you'll find out how
Yeah,
important that
estate
is,
planning.
estate
Yeah.
planning, retirement planning, tax strategy. So you'll really, really get a solid foundation. But I think also working in the industry, there's a lot they don't teach you, just like every field. Like doing it is very different than learning about it. And so I think that if I were you, I would say working in the with virtual client services, you'll learn.
Yeah.
It'll be tedious and I will say repetitive, probably
Yeah.
boring,
Yeah.
but
I have
it'll
to
give
take
you,
a test.
yeah.
Uh,
Oh,
Yeah,
did
I have
you?
to take a test. Yeah, it's apparently I have to turn in up to like 21 documents, and basically they're like keep 48 hours of your schedule open because we don't it takes different amounts of time for different people, likely it'll take like 4 to 5 hours all in all, but they basically are like we want to make sure that people can reach out to resources, like it's kind of open notes, open book kind of thing. It's pretty in depth, but it shows that they really care about like who they're
That's
hiring.
Yeah, that's fantastic because I've hired so many people where I'm like, okay, this is what you have to do. Like, and it's a lot of like, you get like paperwork or there's something missing, and then you have to figure out like who do you reach out to solve the problem. And I will tell
Yeah.
you, I have seen more people than I care to mention fail at the administrative side of personal finance who had a huge interest in it and had like all the skill sets to do the advising part. But if you don't know how to execute on the paperwork initially, you never get
Yep.
to be the advisor. Because no
No.
one starts no one start like just like in any job. They're not like, oh, you're here, you're gonna be the top mechanic. Like you're gonna be in charge of all the
Yeah.
mechanics.
Yeah. You
It
know everything coming
you
in.
know, yeah, like you passed all the exams, but you have to be able to actually do the work, right? Like you have to be able to fix the part, not just be in charge of the mechanics. And so
Right.
the pushback I've often got is like, well, I really just want to work with the clients. It's like, yeah, but if you don't understand how the back end of this works, you can't work with the clients because they're going to say, okay, I want to do this. And they're going to say, so when do I get my money? And you're going to say, I don't know. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know what the process is. I have no idea how, you don't know if there's a form that needs to be signed for it. Like, is it sold
Yeah.
today? Is it sold tomorrow? Do you need a verbal today? Do you need a verbal tomorrow? Is it 3 business days? Is it 5? How many forms need to be signed? Who get, you can't sit in a client meeting because they're going to ask you so many questions and you're not going to know
Yep.
anything. And then the client's going to be like, why am I sitting with you if you don't? Because you get asked a lot of nitty gritty questions in a meeting that don't appear to be nitty gritty. But yeah, I
Yes.
want to do a Roth conversion. Okay, well, if
Mhm.
you don't have to do the paperwork for that, like, yeah, you can say, okay, this is how it works in theory.
Yeah, in theory, right? Yeah.
But like, yeah, you're going to do this. Okay, so do it, and then you don't know how to do it, like because at some point you get an assistant. Ideally, as your career goes, you hire someone to offload that, but you
Yeah.
still need to know the operations of everything so that you can talk intelligently to the client and say, okay, that's going to
Yeah.
take a few business days, or before we do that, we really need to do this because without this, we can't do B without A. And so I've seen more people fail on the administrative when they probably were capable of working with clients, but they just couldn't get through the admin part. And you have to know
Yeah.
the admin part, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think if I eventually want to start my own business, I think it will be so valuable to have to start on that client side of things because in the beginning, you are doing everything. You are doing that. You are doing the power planning. You are
Everything.
everything. And so a lot of advisors have told me, oh, maybe avoid that job because you won't be dealing with a ton of the advising side. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not going to be dealing with a lot of that in the beginning of a business,
No.
like you have one or two clients when you are really, really trying to reach out and get clients. You aren't doing financial planning for most of your week. And I think it's really interesting to think about because the smallest things in an administrative process that you don't account for can end up biting you in the butt. I heard this story on a podcast, the most bizarre story, right? They had gotten the paper check from, Schwab or whoever that this guy was transitioning from, and they gave it to him physically and did not put it in an envelope. Well, he puts that check on the back seat, in the back seat of his car, and it flew out of the window onto the highway. And he never saw that check again. And so this advisor was like, so simple. but we started putting our checks into envelopes to hand them to like into contained heavier
Yeah.
envelopes and handed them
Yes.
to our clients. And it's like no one would ever think about that happening in a million years, right? But that process that they revamped, that's admin. Like that is, it's like it's this simple stuff that nothing is ever too simple to gain a lesson from, I think.
Yeah, and what I'll say is you will end up interacting a lot with the clients and the admin. Like if you're opening an account with them, you have to call them and go through the questions, and you learn how to talk to the client without having the
Yes.
pressure of being the advisor initially.
Yeah.
And so you'll learn what the clients are going to ask, where they have stumbling blocks, where they need more clarifications. So I'm
Yeah.
a firm believer in, and maybe in some firms that I don't know, they start you come out of school and they're like, yeah, now you're an advisor. And those are usually commission based roles where they just,
Yes.
yeah. And
Well,
those,
that was
those,
something
those have
else
a
I was going to
high
touch
failure
on
rate,
is
high failure rate.
to me, being a client service associate early on in your career is the better version of going straight into working for a broker dealer and doing nothing but insurance sales, right? You're on the phone all the time, you're talking with clients, but you get a salary and you are in a role that easily transitions into where you want to go in terms of like learning the nitty-gritty of it.
Yeah, I think the client service role is a great role to get your feet wet because you're on a salary and then you're assisting and you get to see everything and how it goes. And you're right, it's not necessarily a broker dealer, but it could be like a insurance company. Usually it's insurance companies, right? I'm not going to name the names, but you can go in on a you got out of school, they put you in the exams, you pass your exams, and then they say, okay, now you're an advisor and you have 6 months to hit these thresholds. And they have high failure rates. I think it's like a 90% failure rate because it's hard.
Yeah.
You don't totally know what you're doing and you have to
Yeah.
hit targets. But I think the better way to go into it, in my opinion, where you can learn and get exposure, not under pressure, is like the client service, the
Yeah.
CSA role.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about this role because so this test, how well you do on it actually sets your initial pay rate, which I think is so interesting. I'm like, you
Wow,
guys
that's
really have
impressive.
thought through this. Yeah, so the pay rate is like 24 to $33 an hour or something like that, which I'm making a decent living wage as is. So it's like if I can, make 24 bucks on top of what I'm making for 5 to 10 hours of work a week, that's great because from the personal finance aspect, I can put that towards paying off, more student debt because I'm going to have to take some on in my program. So it's great because it's like I can cushion my emergency fund a bit more. It's awesome.
Hmm.
And it has, depending on how it goes, and if I want to stick with it, it has the potential of, it's contract right now, but it has the potential of becoming full time. And they're even looking at having like U2 employees. And the great thing as well is they have a power planning side too. So I can transition into paraplanning from CSA work because I have mentioned that upfront that I'm more interested in that side of things. And next summer I'm planning on doing the externship, the paraplanning externship. And that also gives you 500 hours of CFP experience
Credit.
towards the traditional route. And so I just like in my mind, I'm like, okay, this could really just, smooth out into eventually either starting my own business or working for a firm for a few years and then starting my own business after that. So I'm really excited and hope this opportunity works out.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think what you're doing is the right way to do it. So what I always say to people with the personal finance track for a career is it's a slow burn. It takes
Yes.
time to build the skill set, find your
So I've
niche.
heard.
It's a slow burn. And I think that's what I think two things really turn people away. One, the administrative aspect of it, because like people are like, well, I don't want to have to do paperwork. And it's like, yeah, I don't either.
I
But like
honestly
right now,
don't mind the paperwork side, so I think that's definitely
oh,
a
so
good
that's
sign.
good. Yeah, that's a good thing. I don't love it, but like I think the reality of being an adult is that you do a lot of things that you don't love all the time. And most of the
No.
time, I don't have to do the paperwork, but sometimes I do have to do the paperwork. And that's fine. That's
Yeah.
just part of the job. And when I started, I did all the paperwork. So I learned how to do everything. So I think
Yep.
that's one of the obstacles because there's a lot of compliance in this industry. And so therefore, there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of
Yeah.
procedures that you don't set. And then second, I think it's a slow burn, and I'm not a slow burn individual. Like I'm the
Me
type of
neither.
person who is like,
Yeah.
okay, well, it takes 4 years. I could probably do it in two.
Yes, exactly. It's
You,
like, how can I
so
expedite this process?
yeah, that's how I'm like, well, I'll just work double. Everyone's going to do 40 hours. I'll do 80. And then I can go from 4 years to 2 years. So I'm not,
Yeah.
so I won't discourage that. If you work harder than everybody, you'll go way faster than the industry, which is what I did. I went way faster than the industry. And now I've like chilled out a little.
Yeah.
So you can go faster, but in general, the industry is a slow burn because it takes a while to accumulate the practical experience, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
And like learn the ropes. No, absolutely. And
Hmm.
with being a career changer on the slow burn front, I am trying, I have told people if someone offered me a job tomorrow and it aligned with my morals and I felt like it was an ethical company, I would take it. I would put my 2 weeks in and take it. And I'm trying not to let that affect my decision making, right, in transitioning into this career because like I said in the beginning, it's not a decision that I want to take lightly. It's something that I have spent like over a year, year to 2 years at this point thinking about, and just now I'm pulling the trigger on going back to school for my bachelor's, and I'm glad that I've really thought about it. I even explored software development for a while and I was like, I want to talk to people. I don't want to sit in front of a computer if I'm not talking to people, you know? Like again, I'm okay with the admin. I really can channel my focus into like just getting it done, right? And again, the translation between my field and this field, it's like I actually find the FAA regulations kind of interesting. And I'm like, that's a green flag, probably. That is probably a green flag for, getting into compliance or like getting into all the nitty-gritty with Social Security, with Roth conversions, with, all the things you have to do to stay on the legal side of things.
Hmm.
So I do think that that'll translate pretty well.
Yeah, that's good. And you're doing your research, which I think is it's also good to talk. There's, as you said, there's a lot of different variations in the industry. So to talk to all the different types of CFPs and who's doing what and what they like about what they're doing, what they would do differently. I think that's all very helpful. I did the same thing when I started.
Great. Yeah, well, I'm just looking forward to the journey. I think as long as I'm working full time and not full time in this specific industry, it's definitely going to be a struggle. I think just, I'm doing manual labor all day. And so coming home, it's a change of pace, if I got to sit down and do my schoolwork, but mentally I'm pretty drained at the end of the day, especially being in a field that I don't particularly enjoy a ton. But I think this will just truly, when I do graduate with my bachelor's and when I do get my CFP, if that's what ends up happening, like I think it will just feel so well deserved and it's something I can really, really respect about the effort that I put in. So I'm looking
And
forward
I
to
will
that moment.
say this job you can do till you're like 90.
Yes, that's what I love about it. It's the only career that I have explored in my vast exploration of careers. It is the only career that I feel that I could see myself doing for the next 20, 30, 40 plus years, and that to me, again, green flag after green flag. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, they have an issue because you get to a certain point and you become very close with your clients and you know what you're
Yeah,
doing, right? Like you're an
yeah,
expert in whatever niche. And I have a lot of older advisor friends and older, I'll say like approaching 70, somewhere in that age bracket. And they're like, yeah, they want me to retire, but like it's so easy. Like I'm friends with all my clients. I've had my clients for 40, I've had my clients with me for 40 years. Like I don't want to
yeah,
turn them over to
no,
somebody. And a lot of them aren't working full time, like not working Monday, because that's the other thing,
that's
not
what I
working
love.
Monday to,
Yeah, there's
they're working a
flexibility
few
in this
days.
field.
Yeah, there's a lot because I spent part of the year
Yeah,
in Utah.
that's
So,
awesome.
and what I will say is it didn't start out that way. It did not start
Yes,
out that
yes,
way at all. But eventually you get to, it's like climbing a mountain, the way I would describe it. It's a lot of work to get to the top, and not everyone gets to the top. And then you get up to
yeah.
the top and you're like, okay, I got to where I need to be income wise. The business, employees is always the hard part, I think, when you own your own business.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and then now, we don't need to take any new clients. I'm going to spend part of my year here, and it gets dramatically easier is what I would say. So that's the nice thing is
Yeah,
you put in all this effort and then you get there, to wherever
yeah,
that you decide you want to be. And then it really gets dramatically easier. And so what I've noticed is all these advisors are like, don't you want to retire? And they're like, no, I just, they really love what they do. So why would they retire? They
Yes.
golf with their clients on Thursday. They spend the winter in
Yeah.
Florida. So
Yeah.
it's a
They're
very
basically
nice,
retired if you think it's like retired with purpose, sort of is like how I see it. And I'm,
yes.
on that note of like long term, like I think I mentioned it to you in our message, but me and my partner would love to move to France eventually. And I'm actually chatting in a couple weeks with the CFP who lives in France, who does remote
Oh,
work
wow.
for
That's
clients. And
so
so,
cool.
yeah, I have, let me tell you, I have leaned into the networking side of this, and I'm so thankful I have, because I wouldn't have heard about this job opportunity without the networks that I've sort of built.
Yeah,
And I didn't
I
expect
hadn't
it.
heard of
I
this.
didn't expect it to happen so soon, to even have a potential job prospect, but it only took like a month of me just making networking my part-time job.
No, that's fantastic. So yeah, I think that's the big, what I say to people is which is my believer in life is everything that's hard work is worthwhile, is worthwhile. Like
Yeah.
that usually the path is hard if it's really,
Yeah, if it's
the
worth
best
it,
time,
right?
if it's worth
Absolutely.
it. So I do think that the reason a lot of people don't go into the industry is it's a lot of exams, it's a lot of work, there's the admin, there's all
Yeah.
these hurdles. A lot of people drop out. A lot of people
And if
drop out
it's,
before they get there. And then I'm like,
yeah,
you stuck with it. It's such an amazing career path, I think.
yeah. And if you're not one of the guys whose dad owns a firm or his granddad has owned the firm before his dad, it's not easy. Like just simply put, it's not easy to break into the field. And
No,
so,
it's not. It's not. And here's what I would say. Here's what I would say because I bought my dad's business, but I bought it for a premium because my dad's from the Bronx, so there are no deals.
no, no,
So
no, no,
I
absolutely
yeah,
not.
but what there's no deals when you're a street kid from the Bronx. An immigrant family. Everyone's like, why did you pay? Why did you pay so much? I was like, you need to meet my father. I got a deal
Hmm.
by having the opportunity to buy a family business, but I did not get an
Yes.
opportunity on the multiple.
Right.
Um, but there's a lot of these businesses for sale.
Yeah.
So one thing is what you could do because I think it is definitely easier than starting at scratch. Now the issue, here's what I'll say. Here's the issue because there's a pro and con to everything in life. If you buy someone else's business, you buy their clients,
Yes.
right? And so those clients may not align with what you want for a client
Right.
base. And so maybe you say, I'm going to do that because it gets me going. And then
Yeah.
I'm going to take the time to kind of push into the, niche I want, but I'm going to start here. So there's
Yeah.
always two choices, right? One
Yeah.
you build from ground up, which I would agree would be harder. And so I would say that from a business standpoint, the easiest thing to do is either start somewhere, right? Or maybe you have some clients, you build some relationships while you're learning and working for somebody else. And you know what you might find? If you work for a small firm, you might not
I
want to
might like
ever,
it.
you might just
Yeah.
love it. You might be like, I'm
Yeah.
not worried about,
I am not ruling that out as a possibility because, my mom is an entrepreneur and I've always found business really interesting. And even growing up, like I went and sold things on eBay for my parents' friends and took a small cut. Like I was one of those kids. And so I do feel that I'm drawn to that entrepreneurial side and I have that spirit, but I also know that it's often romanticized. And I do understand that there is so much sacrifice that comes with it if you are trying to start from the bottom, right? And so I'm
or
not
even,
I'm
or
not ruling
even,
out working
yeah,
for a firm.
even buying a business because then you have to do like the transition and so there's so many different options. It is hard to get into, but buying a business is an option, starting a business is an option. And then what
Yeah.
I would say is if you find a nice small firm
Hmm.
and they give you, they won't give you freedom right away, but if you get to the where you're a producing advisor, you kind
Right.
of for as long as you're doing your job, no one will really bother you. Like you might
No.
find like, well, this is exactly what I want. I have the freedom and flexibility, and I don't
Yeah,
have
and I
to
mean
be in charge
that's
of like everything.
yeah, that's another reason I'm trying to spread my roots early on with these niches that I'm really interested in. It's like if I create these relationships with these advisors from the time I'm in school, I mean,
Yep.
who knows, right? They could be like, wow, I really enjoyed chatting with Celine. I've really enjoyed seeing her grow. I know she's doing XYZ, at whatever point I'm at my career. And it's like, let me go talk to her about a potential business venture, or like people
Totally.
people don't
You
realize,
never know.
how important those conversations are. And so and I'm not going into these conversations being like, give me a job. I'm literally just going into these conversations with wanting to be a sponge, like quite literally just wanting to soak up anything of value and everything of value that they may have for me.
But your luck increases the more you're out there. You don't get lucky
Yep.
sitting at home talking to
The more
nobody.
I play,
That's
the luckier I get.
yeah,
That's what my
exactly. So
mom always told me growing
yep,
up.
that's what my dad told me. You don't get lucky sitting home alone. You have to be out there meeting people because you just never know.
Yeah.
So I think you're doing the right thing. Well, Celine, this was wonderful. Do you have any other questions?
I think that about covers everything that I kind of wanted to chat about today, but I really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I wish you the best of luck on your journey. And thank you for coming on so all of our lovely listeners can hear about becoming a CFP.
Of
And so
course.
to follow along, our most up-to-date information is on Instagram, Future Rich Podcast, and you can apply to be a guest on the website, which is www.futurerichpodcast.com. And if you like the podcast, the biggest thing you can do to help us is share with a friend. Time for our disclaimer. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance references are historical and do not guarantee future results. Make sure that you consult with your own legal, tax, and/or financial advisor before making any decisions.